about what they call cell phone or mobile phones in general.
No, I haven't seen
Basically,
it.
he was contacted by what I call one of the Microsoft boosters of IDG. He usually writes for a site called Network World, and it kind of mirrored it. And it belongs to IDG, which owns IPC, and does all kinds of Wintel flavored articles. And this guy writes for what's called the Microsoft subnet, so they have a whole section dedicated just to Microsoft. And he was chatting to Stallman over the mobile telephone. He was speaking to him in Spain, I think, and he was then trying to make fun of Stallman for actually responding to the call to do an interview on somebody else's phone, and then he was putting in the headline the word Stallman and Stalin, and trying to kind of portray Stallman as this extremely irrational person who doesn't want to use phone and says you shouldn't use phones either. Now, I just thought it wasn't a very fair article, but given that it came from the same person who keeps pushing these articles that say, Microsoft, we love open source. And then he actually puts it in the article with Stallman. He puts this link, trying to push all of these other, so-called reports and all these whitewash kind of Microsoft is open source and you should like Microsoft and it's part of the community. And he's always drawing these cards and they try to demonize Stallman based on the fact that he was criticizing some basic surveillance in phones. I don't think many people talk about that. But as you get more and more antennas in here, you get better and better location of people using triangulation. You can actually locate people as they're using their phones throughout the day. And in Europe, you have to retain this data for about 6 months in most countries, so you know where people have been throughout the day.
But the way modern social networking is happening now, people are quite willing, apparently, to dent tweets or Foursquare or Facebook their location as well. It beggars belief when you watch some tweets and some dents whereby you can follow somebody throughout the entire day purely because their little application on their phone, they're pressing a button and it's broadcasting to the world exactly where they are and when they are. It's frightening the way that technology can be used these days in terms of surveillance, but it doesn't even have to be under a covert veil.
They do the same type. Did you know about Form? PH Form.
Yeah, oh yes, the directed advertising.
Yeah, it
was
released in part by, I think it was a spin-off of, not exactly a spin-off, but people used to work, BT were creating this company, and the British government was very happy with them doing what they do, though. And still lots of ISPs in the UK, they very happily have your identity matched with everything you do on the net. And it's not just the web pages, because what they do is a deep packet inspection, so they actually sniff your things inside, perhaps your emails and things like that, and trying to build profiles of people. So in addition to knowing where people go, this is in many ways even worse. They try to know exactly what you're doing, and the reason they do so is to try and push you towards buying certain things. They try to read your mind, and then sell it to advertisers, who in turn try to monetize that. And that's a really troubling thing, especially if the government is going to be involved in that, and I suppose they will to some extent, because as the data is stored somewhere in some data center, and they have some file on you or some warrant, they could go to the data center and say, give us all you got about this person, because we want to know what he's been doing online, what he's writing to people, and so on. And of course, they can probably even get chats of, like, if they have some decryption, if they have some big machines to do some decryption, they could even see what you're chatting to people about in IRC or in Skype and all kinds of things, because they take it at packet level, not just at the level of that Google is taking, which is just tracking which pages you're viewing, and Facebook is doing the same now with the like button. I'd like to view it as kind of the thumb up, thumb up here, up here or something. And that's basically just a way of tracking the user as they go along. It's basically some JavaScript thing that's scanning your, screen resolution and where you've been before and what you're doing, and they build a database of that, and they try to sell it to companies, and And that's what happens with the web. The lots of companies try to have you not think about the issues, and the FSF at the same time is trying to warn you that these things are getting worse and worse and more malicious towards the users, and people just don't seem to mind, to be honest, and that just kind of concerns me personally.
Because Form, I mean, that was something that I think was that 2009. That's what came to a head at. I'd completely forgotten about that. Yeah.
I think 2008 I wrote.
Because it got particularly nasty at one point. I certainly remember reading it about it in one of the off-the-shelf magazines. And there was all sorts of allegations being thrown about people who were pro-it, anti-it, and but then it all seemed to die a death, I think, didn't it?
And I think it's still alive. People just don't talk about it.
Because they ran a test, didn't they?
It's DPI now.
Because they ran a test without the user's permission or without the user's knowledge.
Yeah, and I think TalkTalk is one of the latest one to be caught using that. And they can lower the price if they can sell people's privacy away and sell people's dignity away. And I think the European Commission at some stage, this was really fascinating how you see the European Commission stepping in and basically saying, that's terrible, you cannot do that. And then they have to go to the British government and tell them, how dare you let this thing go on? And it was the same thing what happened with the BBC back in the days. Is the European Commission had to kind of, to reprimand the British government for doing certain things to benefit certain corporations within the borders. It's a really tricky one, and I think the government has lots to gain from these things. In the case of the BBC is really useful to the government because it is quite, it's not very independent. It's still run with some sort of oversight from the government, so it's not quite the same as some of the press you might have. And the same thing happens with Forum. It's almost like a franchise now, and it's always very useful for those who want to use a private, unaccountable corporation to collect data on people. And then as soon as they have the data, and this is really important, as soon as they have the data, you don't have to ask whether the government is a participant in that. All the government has to do is to know that the data is available somewhere, and they can use laws then to go to this company and say, oh, can we please have this data, this person, we think it's a criminal. And that's what they do in the States, and that's what they did recently with Twitter, where even a member of parliament from Iceland had the Department of Justice in the United States go to Twitter and ask for personal data of the member of parliament in Iceland. Very extremely controversial, and only the fact that Twitter decided to inform her that this was going on, that's the only reason we know about it. It happens all the time, but nobody tells you about it. They didn't have to say anything.
Well, we are now coming up to the 1 hour and 50 mark, approximately. Now, keeping in mind that Roy's been very kind in still using his dongle. He's not connected properly to the net yet, so he still has his dongle, and he's probably paying a considerable amount of money for this podcast. Roy, we'll wrap up the show with the final track of the day, unless you have anything else you want to add before we close on the ending track.
No, I think next show we can actually cover more ground. One of the things I said at the start, though, before we start to record this show, we don't really want to do a sort of a grocery list type of show for several reasons. One of them is, in fact, I think it's a lot of work if we have to plan exactly what we cover, and then we have to decide on time and then move every minute or so to the next topic. The second thing, it's supposed to be more of a debate kind of show, or kind of thinking and on the spot without planning. And I don't think we ever pretended to be a news coverage that's kind of extensive and will tell you everything about what's been happening. There's lots of stuff, and we could just go through some headlines and make some comments about them. But some are just not quite so important, and I don't think there has been anything too important recently. Like I said, I just went through lots of news, and I think to me the main news was about ASUS going back to Linux. A very nice indication of the fact that lots of them will eventually realize that even if Microsoft is willing to pay the money to use Windows, they see they cannot actually distinguish themselves in the market. They have to use something that's advanced and something that's liked and something that's perceived as more unique. So
Right. Well, I have a little bit of hot off the press news, as it were, to end on the show on. This last